Longevity for the Long Haul. I wanted to introduce you guys to my first hero in my quest to recover from my long COVID infection. This is John, and John met me like right after my COVID infection, and he actually stood by me through the entire process of going through the healthcare system and trying to figure out like what avenues I had to kind of restore my health and wellness. And I trusted John with everything because I had nowhere else to go as far as getting solutions and working on recovery. So John, just take it away. Just tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so John Kavanaugh. I own a Pilates studio here in Lake Nona, and Jillian came in to me almost 4 years ago, right?
Yeah, you said Jillian. Well, so the big story behind that is when he first met me, I went by Jen. My name's Jennifer Gillen. And then through the process of recovering and healing, then I decided to go by Danielle. So Danielle was the name that I was called when I was a kid. And so in order to recover, it just made it easier. And there'll be more on that in the next episode when I bring Melissa Wiggins, the life coach, on, and she'll talk more about that. So go ahead.
Anyway, so my background, actually, I was a electrical engineer for something like 40 years, building power plants and food processing plants, running an engineering company. Until maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I retired, and I was working with a young lady that did kinesiology, and I was fascinated by the exercises she had me doing. So I went back and got a degree in kinesiology. We moved to Lake Nona, and we just decided we would start a Pilates studio. So that's how I ended up here in Lake Nona, and a bit about my background.
So when I first met him, can you describe what it was like when we first met, what I looked like, what I, just...
Yeah, it was interesting because when Danielle came in, she looked fit, and by all, just looking at her, you'd think she'd be fine. But then when you got close to her eyes, you'd see this dazed and confused. So when we first started working, she was very disorientated and fatigued very easily. And so it was a challenge from the beginning to figure out how best to work with her.
So what were our initial goals? Like, how did we get started? Like, I know, like, I couldn't see sometimes, and sometimes I'd be so tired. And so how did you figure out what was going to be best for me moving forward?
What I had to do is figure out first what you were able to do, and evaluate your condition. And there was no protocol at that time for how to exercise someone who had COVID. So I just evaluated the situation. You explained to me that you didn't know where your limbs were all the time. You exhausted easily. You had a lot of determination. You wanted to get better, and you were going to get stronger. So we started with that. A reformer is a perfect tool to use in this situation, because on a reformer, you're supported all the time.
Yeah.
And that helped you a lot because you were disoriented as to...
Like, I was afraid.
Your balance was off.
Yeah.
Yeah. And...
I was afraid to fall. I was confused.
And the other thing is we would have your feet anchored all the time somewhere. So that gave you, not only were you laying on your back, but you had your feet anchored or you had your hands. And that helped you a lot because you were retraining your neurological system from your hands, your feet, your knees.
My whole brain body.
Yeah, your proprioceptors were confused, or the messages being sent back to the brain were confusing to you. So we had to start there. And that was a perfect vehicle by which to work.
Yeah. And then when we started working on that, at the time I had like an Apple Watch. And so I couldn't control my heart rate. And sometimes my heart rate would be very low or it would be extremely high. And so early on, we kind of figured out what the push and crash syndrome looked like. If we pushed it too far, then that meant I wasn't coming back the next day. And so we used the Apple Watch initially to just kind of pace ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. And so we worked together quite well. And then eventually I found the Whoop, which was a device that kind of gave me a better analysis of my recovery and strain levels, because at least when I came in, I could say, hey, John, I'm agreeing today. And what does green mean?
Right. Yeah. So it was interesting and challenging in that each day when you came in, I could have a program in place, but I never knew who was coming into the session. So we always would have to adapt. And the more feedback we got on your condition, the better we were able to adapt the workouts to the day and the way you were feeling that day.
Yeah, so I'd say on a green day, it was like John was free to do whatever he wanted to do with me that day. If I was yellow, then we kind of stuck with the same exercises and movement. Initially, we did like the 10 crunches, the 10 squats, the 10 push-ups, the 10 curls. Of course, all of those things were moderated by the reformer. So I didn't really have the full weight and strain of my own body. So we could make adjustments. So then I could get the range of motion and I could get more reps in based on my activity tolerance. That's what I called it at the time. What would you tell someone, it was like another Pilates instructor, if they were trying to figure out how to help someone like me somewhere else?
Well, for me, I had the kinesiology background, so I know how the body worked, right? I knew how the neurological system worked, the cardio, the pulmonary, how they all worked. In a situation like yours, all we could do was assess where you were and then have a goal on where we wanted to get to as far as strength, stamina, mobility, endurance. And we would have a sequence of exercises and progressions that we'd want to go through. And that way we can measure our progress. But what you have to be prepared for when you're an instructor is that some days you can go ahead with the program that you have planned. Some days you're going to have to adjust your program. And so my advice is, you know the protocol that you're going to employ, you know the progression of the exercises that you're going to employ, but you need to have alternatives prepared so that if you're not able to go that next step that day, you have something else you can work on. So what we would work on is, if you couldn't do the strength, then we would work on stretching. If you couldn't do the endurance, then we would work maybe on strength. So we had I would have prepared 3 different plans for depending who I was going to get that day.
Yeah, because sometimes it would be very depressing because my mind would want to do, like I was always trapped inside myself. And prior to coming to John, I already did Pilates, so I already had a previous knowledge of that. And I think what helped me a lot was that John's attitude was never, oh, you feel bad today? Oh no, like it wasn't the end of our session. Like he was pretty optimistic and he just really was objective about assessing me during the exercises. He was also objective about our goals, because at first it was just being able to pick my kids up from school and back and drive, and like being able to bend over, because bending over and getting the dishes out of the dishwasher or doing laundry was very difficult for me. And so I remember early on we did a lot of inversion techniques so that my body could get acclimated to do that again, without it being so disorienting, because I was confused. And I think, for me, from my standpoint with John, when I was confused, it was like when we were doing Pilates or the TRX, I would watch his movement. I wouldn't necessarily know what I was doing, but it was like John was friendly enough and kind enough that he, didn't make me feel embarrassed or ashamed that I got to like just stare at him and just wait, because sometimes he would tell me to do something and then there would be a delay in my mind, and then I would say back to him. I think this was the other part of me learning what I was supposed to be doing. Was he'd say, do this, and then I would look back at him and I'd say, I'm doing that, so then I could actually do it, because there was a connection. There were parts of my body that I couldn't feel. Like one of the spots was like near my hip, like I couldn't, like where I could feel it on the right hand side, I couldn't feel it on the left hand side. And then it was the coordination of movement. And our goals weren't like every day and hard and fast. Our goals were like moderate. So by the end of the month, this is what my goal was, like this is what I wanted to do. And he never ever, there was no finish line, and there still is no finish line for me right now, because right now we're working on my ability to run again and my ability to climb. Like I want to be able to respond. Like that was my goal, is like if something happened, like if my kid ran out in the middle of the road, I would want to be able to respond and, tell my kid to stop or run after him or get someone's attention. It's like I lost my ability to respond in real time to life, which was devastating. But with John's background being an engineer, he was always super creative. And I don't even know how I got to where I am today, but I know that John always called me to make sure I checked in and made my next appointment. He made sure that I was still kind of moving towards a goal of being more independent and confident in my body and my surroundings, because that was one of the first things he said he noticed was like my proprioception. Like I just didn't know where things were.
I remember one day we were doing leg presses and you told me, I know where my feet are and I know where my hips are, but I don't know what's going on in between. That's okay. You're pushing just short.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah.
It was, for other people who are going through this situation, Danielle at times just it was almost like a blank stare behind her eyes when we were trying to work out. And you could see that she could hear me, but she sometimes didn't understand what I wanted her to do. And other times you could see she understood what I wanted her to do, but she couldn't get her body to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And but we
just
every day we would do whatever it took to get either more mobility, more strength, more stamina, if it was working that day. If not, then we figured something else out.
Yeah.
But your determination was the thing that I was always impressed with. You were going to do it.
Yeah. It didn't matter how long it was going to take me. I was going to regain that confidence. And I think because he didn't feel sorry for me, or he didn't think I couldn't do it, or because he didn't think I was faking, or that he didn't think I just wanted extra attention, he was just like knew how to keep me moving forward, because he trains for lots of like Tough Mudders and like triathlons. And so literally your COVID recovery is a whole new training session. You're training for the rest of your life, because what I've learned is that your metabolic function is an invisible disease that you don't even understand. But we all know if we improve our metabolic function, we'll improve our quality of life. And when I first met John, I couldn't move very much. And I had atrophy to some extent. And so it was crazy to think that here I am. Let me see, I'm 48. So I think I was 44 at the time. And I always told people I went to bed 80 and woke up. I went to bed 40 and woke up 80, And what was it like for you to see that, like, in a person? Like, because nobody knew anything about COVID, but then here COVID happened. And so.
Well, like I said, when you first came in, to look at you looked very fit.
Mm-hmm.
There were no obvious handicaps or abilities that you were suffering from. So it was a bit disorientating on, why does this woman need individual attention in this? And you know what? Once we started working with you, it became obvious. I remember telling you at the beginning that the body has an incredible ability to repair itself.
Yeah.
We're not quite sure what's wrong, but your body will try and repair itself. We just need to give it a map by which to do that.
Yeah.
And so, because I knew how the body functioned, I was able to communicate that to you, and you knew it because you were a nurse.
Yeah.
And we would check in on all the systems, see which ones were functioning, and then just do exercises and movements that would, I always said that we're really trying to map your proprioceptors to your brain so that it would know where your feet tips were at the same time.
Yeah. I think another thing that was super important to me, because John obviously is older than me, but yeah. So whenever I first started going through the healthcare system and I went to go see like an infectious disease doctor who identified all the antibodies that I had from previous active infections that increased my risk for long COVID. Then I started going to the pulmonologist, and then I started going to the cardiologist and my neurologist and my neuropsychologist. Like, I went to all the ologists, and John's sitting back here listening to all the type of assessments that are being done because they were trying to rule out if I had MS or not, which is an autoimmune disorder as well. And whenever the cardiologist had ordered a cardiac MRI, which is just a picture of my heart, and my insurance company wouldn't cover it, and I come in and I tell John, I was like, they want to do a cardiac cath on me, and I was just, and my insurance company is making this decision, and my cardiologist making this decision doesn't agree with this decision. It's like, what do I do? And John basically told me, he's just like, that's like ridiculous. So he supported me at the time, and I'm going, I don't need that. I don't need a cardiac cath. And I still to this day haven't got my money back from Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is $5,000, which I'm just saying it in the podcast because if we say it, sometimes wild things happen that I'll get my money back. And then I had a neurologist, and then everything that everybody was telling me had nothing to do with me and who I was. And he was riding with me through the entire thing. So he was with me when I was trying to figure it out and navigate the healthcare system. He was with me when I went to Mayo, and then I did the central sensitization training, and he saw like the impact that had on my ability to function. And then he was also with me after I went to Aviv and I did my hyperbaric oxygen therapy treatment. Like, in your perspective, like, when did you see like the greatest improvements?
You've gone in leaps, Mm-hmm. So the first thing I think that I noticed was we did start getting strength back.
Mm-hmm.
So there was atrophy because you were sick for so long, and but then we started to gain some strength. It wasn't great leaps and bounds, but we were getting strength, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest was when your vision started to improve. Yeah. Yeah. And it'd be funny. Sometimes you'd be looking at me and it's like, can you even see?
Yeah. And then we did the Zone 2 training. I think the Zone 2 training had given me exponential results when I applied that to my recovery.
Oh, yeah. I think, the barometric. Hyperbaric. That helped a lot, I think, mm-hmm. in that in the clarity of your thinking.
Yeah, a lot of my healing took place when I hyperbaric.
But the Zone 2 training is just transformed your body. You're more fit.
My recovery is more consistent.
Is great. And even your strength is improved quite a bit. I mean, we're trying headstands now. We're still working to get that pull up done, but we're much closer.
Yeah.
We can knock out push-ups like there's no tomorrow. But so one was, it's different things. One helped you get the mental clarity, which cleared the eyes up. That's one got you the physical, I think, really, and the endurance.
Endurance.
Yeah. And we're able to do a lot more. I've been doing the zone 2.
And so he's going to stick with me until I'm running. And like running and dancing have always been my goal from the beginning, because that's how I identified myself before. It was just part of my personality. It's what I did. And I'm just trying to get back to where I once was. And so John and I, it's funny how COVID brought us so close and like together. He's like my main supporter. And so eventually in the future, we're going to host a LongCOVID class at IMX, so people with COVID who have hesitations and don't feel like they have a community and they don't know kind of where to get started, because you feel like, you're lost inside yourself. And Pilates is he's a safe place to talk to you about your goals and ambitions in recovering.
I think as much as we've learned about COVID over the past 3-4 years, there are still people out there that are suffering from long COVID, but don't even recognize that that's what they're suffering from.
Yeah.
I had a guy come in. He thought he had a bad back.
Right.
And he was a weightlifter. He did Olympic weightlifting. He got sick, or he got injured during COVID. And during that period, he got COVID 3 times. Even though he had the vaccines, he got it 3 times. And I was working with him on the second, or I think it was the third time I was working with him. And he was complaining that all of his joints were hurting. I asked him, I said, are all of your joints hurting? Because what you're complaining about now
isn't a
structural thing. It isn't your back. And he said, yeah, actually, they all hurt. Yeah. He said, I just thought that was all, that it went from the back to these other places. And I told him, I think you need to go get checked, because I think what you have is maybe some type of autoimmune, because you got inflammation in all of your joints.
Yeah. And so like, we're not here to like diagnose people or like put them in classifications, but we're just literally here to kind of help people figure out what is going to work for them, what is going to help them recover. And now we're trying to create a community that is a safe place for people to kind of accomplish their goals. So, okay, this is one of my favorite things that I like to ask people, because now I'm going to have a podcast. I feel like there's 3 kind of questions I can ask you that will give people an idea like who you are. So the first question I like to ask is, what is your favorite quote?
Oh, favorite quote. That's an easy one. It's from Nelson Mandela. I was living in South Africa and went to a talk by his personal photographer. Mm-hmm. And the guy told how, one day he was moping around and they call him Mandela, Mediva. Yeah. But he said he was moping around, and Nelson Mandela said to him, Jason, what is your problem? You're down today. Uh-huh. And Jason said, well, I work with you every day, and you've accomplished so much, and you suffered through so much, and my life seems easy, and I'm, 30 years old, and what can I show for my life? He goes, I'm just depressed that I'm not doing anything. And Mandela, he said he sat there for a little bit, and then he said to Jason, he goes, Jason, in order to be relevant, one must serve. And so that's my favorite quote from anybody is, in order to be relevant, one must serve.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely feel like that is like, that's the whole purpose of the podcast for me, is that it's to serve people who don't have the inability and the experience to kind of navigate this and feel confident in the decisions that they're making moving forward in their recovery. Okay, so my other favorite question to ask is, so most people would say, who do you follow? But you're older, so I could say, who would you say who is somebody that you admire?
When I was running an engineering company, I did a lot of reading of different leaders, and I particularly liked Teddy Roosevelt. Mm-hmm. He was a man that I think he rose above politics. I mean, he was a politician, but he rose above it. And his motto was, it's a fair deal. So, I have to treat this side and that side fairly. It has to be fair for both sides. So I admire him. He was the one that busted the trusts, and he's the one that told the unions, you're going to go back to work today because the American people can't suffer because you're striking. So both the labor side and the business side, he took on and gave a fair deal to the public. We need more people
like that, for sure, 100%. And so what would you say is your favorite book?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'm going to say favorite author.
Your favorite author?
Yeah, so I like Kurt Vonnegut. A lot of you are probably too young to know who Kurt Vonnegut is. But he was an electrical engineer, too. He was working for GE, and then he started writing books. All of his books are
excellent.
Great. I love him because he's extremely intelligent, articulate, and funny. Very funny. You read his books, you laugh out loud. So any book by Kurt Vonnegut you're going to enjoy.
So I just want to thank you, John, because I know that you don't know the impact that you had on my life. And I feel like we've changed each other's life through the whole entire process. And I feel like we're going to keep changing other people's lives by helping them kind of identify and find those small steps that they have to take to keep moving forward. Because with long COVID, it's a chronic illness. It's not something that's going to go away overnight. And, you know, that's what I look forward to. The podcast is showing everybody like all the little teeny tiny things that you can gain awareness over, and then you can regain control over your life.
Yeah, thank you. You've allowed me to be relevant. And you are continuing to be relevant. So you're doing a great job, and you've done a great job. Appreciate it.
Thank you. As always, thanks again for listening to Longevity for the Long Haul. You can find John at IMX Studios here in Lake Nona. Thank you again for always listening to Longevity for the Long Haul. Be sure to rate the show and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. Comment below if you want to ask me more questions about things I didn't discuss. Have a great day.